32 with everyone. This is another episode of Beyond the Tape. I'm your host, TJ Wingert, and today we got a very special Grade the Mock, and we're doing something a little different today. The godfather of mock drafts himself, Mel Kiper Jr., has put out a new 2025 mock. We're going to go ahead and review all 32 picks in his mock draft, and then I did this on my own YouTube channel towards like the end before I started 32 Beat Writers, but I'm going to tack on a second round to the picks that Mel Kiper Jr. made. I know Alex from Hail Mary Sports does stuff like this as well, so wanted to try it out here, want to see what the audience thinks. Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Do you like the idea of tacking on a second round to these mock drafts? And furthermore, if you enjoyed today's video and I get enough response and desire to do this once more, tomorrow I will do the exact same thing for Todd McShay's first 2025 mock draft. He just put it out about a week ago. I'm kind of sitting on it. Haven't looked at it yet still, just because maybe I'll do a reaction to it. I want to keep these genuine. I want this to be the first time I'm looking at it, but I also, eventually I want to dive into it. So yeah, eventually I'll look at it, but let me know tomorrow if you guys really like this, want to see a second round tacked on to that, plus a review of Todd McShay's latest mock, first mock of 2025. I will do that for you guys tomorrow. So let me know down below in the comments section, as well as in replies to this on X. Awesome. Without further ado, I also do want to apologize for some camera issues. I'm trying out a new setup here. I got a new Canon camera that I'm using, so sorry for the lagging, and at one point it kind of just like held on a single frame last QB ranking episode, so apologies for the camera issues. I'm still kind of working through that, but hopefully today looks a lot better. Anyways, let's not belabor the point. Let's jump right into it, starting with the number one overall pick in Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest mock draft. It's Abdul Carter. So we've seen this in some of these mocks, like Daniel Jeremiah, is Abdul Carter going number one overall. It's going to be really interesting to see his big board. Mel, that is, is it, Abdul Carter, is it Travis Hunter at one? I think that's going to be consensus, one or the other, going to be the number one player on most people's boards. So doesn't shock me there. I think I would go Hunter. He's the number one player on my board. I do think there's two-way versatility to be used out of Travis Hunter, and Mike Bergonzi kind of said the same thing. Today is the start of the NFL Draft Combine, and some quotes about that kind of coming from Bergonzi that kind of lead me in that direction. So I'd go Travis Hunter here, but Abdul Carter, one player, one spot. I can't knock this pick whatsoever. Cleveland Browns, then Cam Ward. It's the same thing that Daniel Jeremiah had in his latest mock draft. Maybe this is going to start becoming consensus. Also today I did see Adam Schefter on his podcast talking about if there's one thing he's very confident about, it is that the Browns are going to take a quarterback at 2. It's going to be really interesting to see who they have as the top quarterback in this class. Ward versus Sanders. I know Mel has Sanders, and he even says as much there. He has Sanders ranked slightly ahead of Ward, but it does kind of feel like consensus is starting to grow around Cam Ward for the most part. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Browns kind of look at that position, and ultimately what they do decide to do it too. If they go quarterback, I can't hate it, especially if my top quarterback in the class is available in Cam Ward. Giants going Travis Hunter. Now that's interesting. I can see already Mel's talking about the trade rumors for Sam Bradford, bringing in Sam Darnold, signing Darnold to a big money deal. That would be such a Giants move, to be honest. Like, I could totally see that. But I feel like Shane and Dable, they got this year to go draft a guy. So even with Ward off the board, I think they'd be one of the teams that's like, you know what, we didn't totally plan on drafting the second quarterback with a third overall pick, but we're going to do it because we need to draft a guy. Like, you don't want to ever peg a team as that desperate. You don't ever want to go into a draft drafting solely based on positional need. But that being said, it kind of feels like the hole that the Giants have kind of dug themselves into, or the corner they backed themselves into. So would love to see Travis Hunter go. He's going to be, again, number one player on my big board as of this moment, but I don't see that changing either. But the Giants kind of feels like they got to go quarterback there. So that's interesting. But undeniably, he's a threat for them on the offensive side, and he's automatically their best corner, so you can't hate it from that standpoint. Will Campbell then to the Patriots. This feels like one of the higher floor picks that could come here. The Patriots are kind of tricky. Do you want to go Carter if he's there? Do you want to go Hunter if he's there? Will Campbell, Tet McMillan, kind of the next conversation to be had. Mason Graham as well. Graham's going to be a blue chipper for me. I've kind of come around to that. So any one of those three guys, Tet, Graham, Campbell, I'm cool with here. It does kind of feel like you're going Will Campbell just because you watched the Patriots last year. There's a world where they clean a lot of that up in free agency. So, let's get into, I think March 12th is the official start to the new league year. Once we get there, we'll have a better idea of what the Patriots want to do. Some of this also comes down to how, Josh McDaniels feels about Javon Baker, Jalen Polk. Some of those guys already in that receiver room. It depends on your grade of Tet McMillan, right? Like if you're Marcus from That Franchise Guy, great YouTube channel, he sees Tet McMillan as like a blue chipper, And if you think that highly of McMillan, he should be your pick here at 4. if you're going off my rankings, who would I have as the highest available guy? It'd be Mason Graham. So that would probably be the direction I would lean here, but I'm not going to hate on the Will Campbell pick whatsoever. Speaking of Mason Graham, he's the pick here at 5. We see this a ton. This would create a nasty defensive line. Him, Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker, Eric Armstead. I'd love it. And also with Trent Baalke there, no longer there, I should say. Like, this is not a pick that would have happened. I'm optimistic about the new GM hire that they just made. And, I think if Mason Graham's there, I think you pull the trigger on it. He'd be a great fit for that defensive line, and it's a team that could just kind of use a little bit more, I think, resources in the trenches in general, right? Like offensive line, something they could probably look at free agency and throughout later on in the draft. So just kind of reestablishing that as a strength, or trying to get it to be a strength. Raiders, Ashton Jeanty. Yeah, I'm totally cool with this. Actually, I guess the surprising part of this is like no Shedeur Sanders. So actually, now that I say that, this is kind of interesting. So now not only have the Giants passed on him, but the Raiders have passed on Shedeur Sanders. So I find that to be interesting. But I do think, Pete Carroll coming in, I've heard some people say, he's going to want his Marshawn Lynch. I think some of that's true. I think in a lot of the ways you could say the same thing about Will Johnson, right? He's going to want his Richard Sherman. So you got to be careful about Pete Carroll wants his former Seahawk player. Because, that you could say that about just about any of these players in this draft and say, that's that guy's going to play that role for him. So, I think GT, Shedeur Sanders, of course, if they're going to go quarterback route here. Will Johnson certainly makes a lot of sense. Ted McMillan, you got to consider him here as well. Boundary wide receiver, definitely something they can improve upon. So I'm cool with GT, and I think this is about when it starts for me, honestly. Like, I think GT, he could go as high as 6 for sure. I don't think the Patriots would do it. I don't think the Jags would do it at 5. I don't think any of the top 4 would do it either. So yeah, GT here at 6, I think this is kind of where his range starts, and I think it does make sense from a certain standpoint for the Raiders. They have a good offensive line too, which makes drafting a running back at 6 a lot more palatable. And then here we go. Here's Shedeur Sanders coming off the board at the New York Jets. So, this kind of feels like sometimes you'll struggle with this when you're making a mock. Sometimes you'll have a guy, you really want to go to a team, and you'll just have 2 teams kind of ignore the position need, and you kind of write it away, or you can talk it out, and then eventually you get to that guy to that landing spot. Kind of feels like what's happened here. Again, the Giants are pretty desperate for a quarterback, so even if Cam Ward's off the board, I don't think they care, to be honest. And then the Raiders at 6, heavily linked to Shedeur, so that kind of feels like, now just let him sneak through real quick. But maybe Mel's here different. He is the Godfather for a reason. Shedeur Sanders, though, for the Jets, this would be a really fun, kind of landing spot. Him and Tyrod Taylor. I can see a world where Tyrod kind of starts the year and they eventually hand it over to Shedeur. Or you let Shedeur have the reins from the rip. You have a nice veteran quarterback behind him. I think this would be an interesting landing spot. And a lot of it's going to come down to the offensive coordinator, how does he fit, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. If you let Aaron Rodgers walk, if Shedeur Sanders falls in your lap, you have a high enough grade on him, you pull the trigger on it for sure. But if you're going to let Rodgers and presumably then thereafter Devontae Adams walk because you don't feel like your roster is ready to compete, are you forcing the quarterback pick here? I don't know. Again, it comes down to each and every team and who's the highest ranked guy on their board. I would have a handful of players that are going to be ranked higher than Shedeur Sanders. He's going to be, I'm still kind of tweaking some of the numbers, but at the highest, he's going to be in the low 20s. More than likely, he's going to be probably high 30s on my board. So to me, it's like if you didn't feel like you needed to compete and you didn't keep Aaron Rodgers around because you're not a roster ready to compete right now in your eyes, why force the quarterback pick here? Why not wait until 2026? Especially if you're a new hire, new GM, new head coach, you've got a long enough leash to make that happen. So I do find that interesting, and more so, I kind of feels like Mel had a couple of QB needy teams pass on a quarterback that they've been linked to just to make that pick happen. But that's interesting. And also, I do want to talk about combine going on. Shedeur Sanders not going to throw. I don't find that to be surprising whatsoever. He definitely, side by side, he will look like the guy with a much weaker arm than Cam Ward and Tyler Shough and some of the other guys that are going to be thrown there. So, good business decision. And now he's going to throw to his pro day where he controls the environment, the receivers he's throwing to, what they do that day, all that sort of stuff. So, he's kind of playing his cards. In some respects, he's playing them close to the chest. He's playing it conservatively and he's kind of playing it smart because of that. But at the same time, it would be nice to see him throw up against that, and maybe his arm wouldn't look as bad next to Cam Ward. Because then, if that were to happen, holy cow! Imagine the conversations that we would be having about Shedeur. But I think he knows that the arm strength is going to look a little dwarfed compared to some of those other guys. Jalen Walker to the Panthers. I love this. Jero Evero, kind of a base 3-4 guy, and I think he's also someone who will just. He's a smart enough defensive mind that I think you give him an agent of chaos like a Jalen Walker. I've talked about this pick a ton, so we won't belabor the point. You give a smart DC an agent of chaos who's good on sim pressures, stunts, twists, line him up at edge, play him a little bit of off-ball linebacker. I think they're going to maximize that value. I do like the edge stuff, the pass rush stuff a lot more than off-ball linebackers, so you do need to work on that a little bit. But nevertheless, just let him be an agent of chaos, like I've been saying. And this is just a team that needs pass rush weapons right now. They just have next to nothing. Saints go Tyler Warren. I love this. Like I almost did this in one of my mocks. I think it kind of starts at 7 with the Jets. The Saints here at 9 make a lot of sense. Just kind of going best player available, getting another pass catcher, a seam runner, and a big body middle of the field threat for an offense that has 2 guys that work really well down the field, Olave and Shaheed. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like that pick there at 9. Josh Simmons, the Bears. So, Will Campbell, first tackle off the board. Second one's Josh Simmons. I like this fit a ton, man. And whether it's him or Connerly, man, there's a couple guys or Kelvin Banks, depending on where you're at in his evaluation. I think they all kind of make sense there. These left tackles that can fit for the Bears. And I think we've gotten to the point where, Braxton Jones was a good story and he's a good player for a 5th rounder, but if you always have to put that caveat in there, what does that say about the player? So a first-round investment at left tackle would certainly make a lot of sense, especially considering Ben Johnson coming from Detroit, had those bookend tackles set, so I could totally see where sinking a first-round investment at that. Also, Ryan Poles, former offensive lineman, wouldn't shock me if he wants to put another top 10 pick on the offensive line. Will Johnson here, 11, so he falls a little bit. Combine's going to be huge for him. What's that top-end speed looking like? I've heard that the 3-cone's going to be ridiculous, and you definitely see, quick feet, lateral movement on his tape, hip fluidity, too. So I think all that checks out. I think he kind of played banged up this year, and the 40 is going to be huge, and that will kind of determine a lot of different things there. But love him in zone coverage. Very smart player. I do think he has solid closing speed, long arms. I think he checks a lot of those boxes there. And for the 49ers, likely moving or losing Charvarius Ward this offseason, I do think it makes sense. And Robert Saleh coming back, a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 4. I think Will Johnson, that's like chef's kiss kind of scheme fit for him right there. The Cowboys, Amari and Hampton going 12. This is a fun one and not one that I've seen. And he's kind of almost playing on the Jahmyr Gibbs draft where, everyone was talking about Bijan Robinson and how high will he go. And then all of a sudden it's, whoa, Jahmyr Gibbs went in the top 12 as well. And you're kind of getting the same flavor here in this mock. So I dig it. And Hampton as a compliment to Rico Dowdle is kind of interesting. I've kind of been looking at if they can't get Gene T, can they get like a Travion Henderson type, someone who's really good outside the tackles and a good pass catcher. Dowdle's a solid pass catcher, but let him be the between the tackles guy. Here you can just go like full thunder, and then let Dowdle be the pass catcher. Also, I should say, Hampton's good pass catcher and a really nice pass protector. So if this ultimately means the end of the Rico Dowdle era, that's totally fine with me as well. And just get a complimentary guy there. Maybe it's Deuce Vaughn. But this is as high as I've seen Amari and Hampton go, and it's hard not to like the player, right? Like big size, speed, athletic freak who's a monster when working downhill, and you get the third down value. I mean, it's really hard not to like a guy like that, and he's shooting up my big board the more I watch him. So don't rule it out there at 12. Even if GT's gone, it doesn't mean the Cowboys can't look at the running back class. That's a really interesting pick there from Mel. Then we get Armand Membu to the Dolphins. Shout out Ben Fennell. He was tweeting out the backside blocks from Armand Membu. And, I don't know how you watch that and don't get, excited about the idea of him playing in San Francisco or Miami, right? Like these Shanahan disciple, offenses respectively. Him playing right tackle or right guard, depending on how you feel about, Colton McKivitz and Austin Jackson respectively. Just letting him do that. And he's a great athlete on the move. And again, I think he should play tackle. I see him fully as a tackle, but he could also kick ass at guard. So I'm totally fine with that if you already have infrastructure, something in place that works at right tackle. So Armand Membu to the Dolphins. I adore this fit, love the strength, love the movement skills, and just a guy that's coming off a fantastic year at Missouri. Hard not to like the fit there with the Dolphins. Malachi Starks to the Colts. I think this makes sense, right? New DC, Lou Anarumo coming over, kind of plagued by bad safety play, the last year or two there in Cincinnati. I could see where he's like, hey, and, we just lost, Julian Blackmon to free agency. Go get me a guy. And, Malachi Starks is kind of an interesting prospect. I think the athleticism plays as an over the top free safety, but there's some reps from this year where you're like, he's fine. He's okay. I really like the kind of man coverage skill set he has, almost more than I like what he does over the top. So he is kind of an interesting player from that standpoint. I also think Jahdae Barron would be a fantastic fit, right? A lot of zone coverage for Lou Anarumo, so I want to throw that out there. I think Jahdae Barron and Malachi Starks both make a lot of sense there. Mike Green, the Falcons need pass rush. This is just one of those teams where, Falcons at 15, Bucks at 19, those two teams, those two NFC South teams, it's a great year for them to be drafting because it's a loaded edge group, and you can almost assure that, you can pencil a solid edge value pick to one of those teams when you're doing a mock. So, yeah, Mike Green makes sense. Awesome at the Senior Bowl. Great year of tape. led the country in sacks. I mean, what more could you ask for if you're the Falcons? Shamar Stewart, another defensive lineman coming off the board, and it looks like Michael Williams is the next pick. So yeah, we're getting a run on defensive linemen. Here we go. Shamar Stewart, yeah, one of my favorite players. He's a top 10 player on my board, so I think the Cardinals are getting great value here. The funny thing here is I've been, kind of talked about his Senior Bowl week, and I was like, I think a lot of ways he could have like a Darius Robinson type of week where you just look at, man, that guy's big and long, and Stewart's got more first step juice to him, and how would you not love him coming out of the Senior Bowl? Like, I could see him being, this Darius Robinson-esque type of riser. I wasn't the only one to say that. A lot of people were excited about, Stewart going into the Senior Bowl, and he lived up to those expectations. So now it's kind of fun to think about him paired up with Darius Robinson, two guys who you can move inside and out. That'd be a lot of fun that you could have right there if you're Jonathan Gannon and that defensive staff there in Arizona. I think Kenneth Grant would still be my lean here just to get him a true nose tackle that can also do some 3-tech stuff. But they also need edge help too. So Shamar Stewart kind of twofold, right? Edge on early downs, play him on inside in passing downs, third and longs, things like that. Makes a lot of sense to me. Michael Williams to the Cincinnati Bengals. My only concern with this is you drafted a toolsy, tradesy kind of prospect in Miles Murphy, and early on in his career, so don't want to write a story about him yet, but still waiting to see that turn on. So them drafting another one of these toolsy, tradesy, but work in progress types of guys, that gives me a little pause, especially considering, you note Trey Hendrickson there. If T. Higgins can be back, it's kind of hard to make that work cap-wise, and in a lot of ways, I think he's kind of like a Detroit line in the making. I'm really kind of coming around to that, and I think that would be a great, mutual trade. A 2 and a 5 for the Lions is next to nothing to get a guy like that on that defensive line, and for the Bengals, hey, you know what? We don't have the cap space. We'll take the 2 and the 5. So just something I'm toying around with. Maybe I'll do it in my next mock. Which, by the way, we got a fun guest coming on next week for a post-combine mock draft. I'm super pumped to have him on, so something to look forward to next week. All right, so yeah, Michael Williams, get another edge there. Makes sense. This is another one of those teams right there at 17, whether it's Walter Nolan on the interior defensive line or it's James Pierce Jr., Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, Michael Williams, some of these edge rushers. I mean, it's a good year to need that position. I do think the Bengals are going to be looking at that as something they're going to likely go with in the first round. I can totally see it. Tyler Booker then to the Seattle Seahawks. This makes a ton of sense. Interior offensive line is just something they've got to get better at. Gray Zable's my top interior offensive lineman, and then Booker right there after it. But I get it. Small school guy, and maybe you like Zabel more at center than guard. I think he can play all 3 positions. He looked awesome at the Senior Bowl at all 3 of those spots. Booker to me is a left guard through and through, which I guess would mean Christian Haynes is going to be your right guard of the future. I'm also an Oluwatimi guy, so it was good to see him get on the field. He was fine last year, but I do think there's room for him to continue to grow as he gets more playing time. So maybe that's your interior trio, right? Like Tyler Booker, and then Oluwatimi, who's a guy I like a lot, and then Christian Haynes was a guy that I thought could have flirted into late first round territory last year. He ends up going to the 80s, so great value pick there from Seattle. So maybe Booker rounds out that interior trio. Don't hate the pick whatsoever. Tampa Bay Bucks go Jahad Campbell. I've done this a ton of the second round. It just kind of comes down to where you start thinking these linebackers are going to come off the board. Certainly could be guys that go in the first, but Campbell and Schwessinger, my top 2 off-ball linebackers, but I also like Chris Paul Jr. I also really like Demetrius Knight. It's a good group on day 2, though. I kind of see them all as like solid guys I want to look at in the second and third round. So Jahad Campbell, maybe a little rich for my blood, but also he's a total Todd Bowles fit. Wants to blitz his linebackers. They got to get better in the front 7. So in a lot of ways, this checks a lot of the boxes that Tampa Bay is looking for. And yes, it's not an edge rusher, but also there are some people who, and we'll see what happens out of the combine this week. Once we get some measurements, right, like maybe we do change the rhetoric and the narrative around Jahad Campbell, and he becomes another one of these guys that should be an off-ball linebacker, move to edge rusher, like a Jalen Walker, like an Abdul Carter, like a Femi Oladejo from UCLA. So we might be talking about that after the combine. Certainly a possibility there, and maybe that's what Mill's thinking here. Colston Loveland, the Broncos, they're looking for a joker, and Colston Loveland, what's funny? This draft class it's amazing how this kind of works sometimes. Tyler Warren is my top-ranked tight end prospect, and his grade is closest to Brock Bowers of any tight end in this class. But play style, Colston Loveland to me is much more the guy who looks and plays like a Brock Bowers than Tyler Warren. And again, that's not to say that Loveland's better or anything like that. Some people do think that. A guy we're going to have on in, I think, middle of March, I think does stand by that. So it's going to be fun to talk to him about that. Another tease for y'all. But Loveland and Warren are both great. I think they both should go in the first round. And I think Loveland, with his fluidity and his route running ability, playing him out of the slot, like that's kind of the power slot that Sean Payton gravitates towards. I think he's big enough, and I think he's a willing blocker, so I think you can play him in line and get away with it. It's not going to be his strength, but also Sean Payton's a great offensive coordinator. He'll hide those weaknesses. He typically does with his players. Emeka Egbuka going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, so not Luther Burden. I think that's kind of interesting here. Getting a little shuffle, the receiver rankings here, and also no Ted McMillan. So That's also fascinating for me. Emeka Egbuka, though, he makes a ton of sense for the Steelers. Inside-out flexibility. The only downside is you draft Emeka Egbuka here, you're kind of giving up on Roman Wilson. I also do think the Steelers are probably, I tweeted this out earlier today, so follow me on X. I think they're going to trade for a guy. Whether it's Debo, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk, they had a deal in place at the deadline with the Jags to get Christian Kirk. I think they're going to make a trade for a receiver, and they're going to go receiver or D-line here at 21. That's just, as a Steelers fan, that's kind of how I'm reading the tea leaves. So I don't hate these mocks that go receiver in the first round. It's definitely a position they can get better at, especially from a route running standpoint. So I don't hate it whatsoever, but I do think the Steelers are going to go in a different direction. And there we go, Tetairoa McMillan to the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, good Lord, Chargers Nation, stand up. This would be the perfect fit. Opposite of Ladd McConkey, get the big body guy to play on the line of scrimmage, move Ladd around from the slot, play him at the Y, let him be a field stretcher. Tetairoa McMillan's a yard tech, the catch ability automatically kind of makes Quentin Johnston, this is almost like what if Quentin Johnston had more mass to him and actually could play receiver a little bit. No disrespect to my former wide receiver one. Whew, that was a bad draft take for me. But nevertheless, Quentin Johnston strays aside. I mean, how could you not love this? But I also see Tet McMillan as a top 5 player in this class. So, he goes 22, and I have as the number 5 player on my board at the moment. And, that automatically creates, an insane value proposition in my brain. So, fantastic fit. Also, Willie Blocker. I think that would fit with Harbaugh and Greg Roman. So, checks a lot of boxes for me. Love it. Gets to stay out on the West Coast, too. Low moving cost. Shout out to the NFL Stock Exchange. I just don't think he makes it 22, personally. Green Bay Packers, Azaria Thomas had this in my last mock. A great man coverage corner with long arms, big hands, 6'2", and a shade under 200 pounds. That's a Jeff Hafley man coverage corner through and through, and I don't think Jair Alexander's going to be in Green Bay next year. Greg Zabel, the Vikings, I think this is a fantastic fit. Also, division rival Detroit Lions, a fantastic landing spot for Greg Zabel. They just got to get better on the inside. And, Mel notes it here, Garrett Bradbury, and he's a better run blocker than he is a pass protector. He's more, because he gets out in space. He's good on the move. Dalton Reisner kind of been a Band-Aid fix for them the last couple of years. Greg Zabel is the first-round investment that would make a lot of sense. And then you go running back later on in this draft. This team also only has 4 picks, so trade down here from 24 checks a lot of boxes for me. But if you can get Zabel here at 24 and then just draft, literally, there's a lot of running backs that I think really fit with their one-cut zone scheme. You could grab a guy in the 4th round and be yep, that guy's going to be our leading rusher by the end of the year. That's how good of a running back class it is. So I actually really do like the idea of going Zabel here, laying that foundation, then getting that back later on. My last mock, I went running back, which, sometimes you just got to eat your vegetables before you can go do the fun stuff. Kelvin Banks falls all the way down to 25. So, this kind of feels like the way this has been moving over the last couple of months. I still like Kelvin Banks. I still think you play him a tackle. But I will say, had Josh Simmons played the entire year, I would have him ranked over Kelvin Banks. He's just got a smaller sample size than Banks to me. But I do love Banks in pass protection too. So that's where I struggle. And, I think right now Banks is probably the better tackle than Connerly, but in 2 years' time, I might not feel that way. Connerly's on the upswing, so where do you rank those guys? So off the tackle, I've been kind of deliberating, going back and forth, but nevertheless, I like this here for the Texans. Honestly, you could just play him at guard for a little bit. And then I think there's 2 years left on Laramie Tunsil's deal. There's a world where Banks plays a couple years of guard, back half his rookie deal, he's your Laramie Tunsil replacement. Because, Tunsil and Titus Howard both getting a lot of money in the next couple of years for the Houston Texans. So looking off the tackle is not something you see in a whole lot of these mocks for the Texans, but it certainly is one that makes sense. Rams, Josh Connerly Jr., like I said, he's on the up and up, man. He made some huge strides this year. We got to talk to him at the Senior Bowl, and he credited that mostly to just more coordinated movements, having his hands and his feet work in unison. And I think that's only going to get better with more reps, more time. The Rams are a really good draft and develop spot. And I think Connerly, he checks a lot of boxes there. And if they miss out on a Alaric Jackson because he's going to Washington or he's going, wherever the landing spot might be, I think it makes a lot of sense there as a replacement there for him. And then we get the Baltimore Ravens going Nick Emanwari, big body safety that I really like in the box, but and I still need to do my safety rechecks. So this is a guy that I'm not fully done with what my write-up's going to be. But I'm really interested to see what the athletic numbers are looking like, because he is hyped up to be a guy who's going to destroy and obliterate Indy. But also I want to dive back into his coverage stuff, because that's kind of my one main kind of concern. Because I kind of look at a Jeremy Chin type of clone here, but maybe even more athletic, which is kind of crazy to say. But Chin had his woes in coverage too, so that's kind of my main thing. I want to go back and check on Emanwari, but I will be doing that here very shortly. All right, you get to the whoa. Speaking of Femi Oladejo, how did I see this coming? Detroit Lions going with the off-ball linebacker move to edge rusher from UCLA. He's another guy I got to go back and I'm just going to watch a few more games of. Only got to see a couple games before the Senior Bowl, but he really popped at the Senior Bowl as a guy who looks like he's been playing it longer than what he has. And he has a very ideal frame. You know, actually, it's kind of funny. Zadarius Smith, I can almost kind of see that end up being his comp. Maybe not. I'd have to double-check the bodies and the weights and stuff like that. But nevertheless, yeah, I mean, edge for the Detroit Lions makes a ton of sense. I'm still kind of thinking Oladejo, even as a big riser out of the Senior Bowl, probably like day 2 guy. Like probably going to be my top 100. But yeah, I'm excited to go back and check out more tape that I got pretty recently, actually, on Oladejo. Because, yeah, really good week at the Senior Bowl. Really intriguing prospect from a size, length, and power standpoint. So kind of a fun fit there. And especially with his length complementing Aiden Hudson on their side, who has slightly shorter arms. Kind of a match made in heaven there. But again, probably a little rich for my blood. Maxwell Hairston here at 29. So, this is ahead of guys like Trey Amos, who I still really like. Benjamin Morrison, depending on the medical, a guy who I think would really fit well with Dan Quinn and the amount of man coverage he wants to run. So Hairston, though, Hairston's kind of tough. He's got plays that I'm like, yeah, get that guy in man coverage. But then I always come back to his weight. And he's not, Manuel Forbes small, speaking of the Commanders. But, he's a little on the slighter side, and he can get a little grabby, and then I do want to see what the 40 is. The 40 will definitely be a big confirmation to where, like, how much man coverage can he play. But I love his eyes, and I love his click and close. So I almost do think maybe a little bit more of a zone-heavy scheme. Granted, like the Steelers were, 5th in the NFL last year in, like, man coverage rate, and it was still almost like a 60% zone coverage team. That's just where we are in the NFL, right? It's primarily zone coverage. So no matter where he goes, it's mostly zone, but I almost do wonder if it's best to be, like, an Asante Samuel Jr. replacement in Los Angeles for the Chargers. Like, I almost think that's maybe his best landing spot. But interesting idea. Get him in the first round. He had a good Senior Bowl. Maybe a little rich for my blood, though. And especially, yeah, ahead of Jahdae Barron. I get it. Barron, I think it'd be fine in man coverage the next level. Another guy that, 40 is going to be a big box to check here for him. The foot speed in general, maybe you don't love it for man coverage, but I love him in zone coverage too. And I think Barron's an even better zone coverage corner than Hairston. So that's kind of an interesting pairing there. But Barron to the Bills, like if he makes it here to 30, Sean McDermott should personally sprint the card in. For how much zone coverage they play, Jahdae Barron to me the best zone coverage corner. The only concern that might be, it's actually funny that Kiper mentions Cooper DeJean right there. The only concern might be that I've heard that he might have sub 30-inch arms, which that's a slot threshold. The counter to that, I value the slot position more than anybody. I'm willing to say more than anybody out there. Like, I think I genuinely stand by it. 5 to 10 years, we'll be talking about the slot corner as the cornerstone of NFL defenses. So I don't personally mind that whatsoever, especially if you are a great run defender and a great tackler like Jahdae Barron is. He's also a weapon as a blitzer, so I'm totally cool with it, and that's why Cooper DeJean was my number 1 corner last year. He was the top nickel, love what he could do, especially in this day and age of too high, and I think Jahdae Barron brings a lot of those same qualities. Not a one-to-one comp, but it is kind of interesting that he brought up Cooper DeJean there in that write-up. All right, 2 more picks. Ariante Iriswary goes 31 here. Left tackle, definitely a problem spot for the Kansas City Chiefs, so certainly makes some sense to go there. I do almost wonder if they're the Cam Robinson team, right? Just go get a veteran in there who kind of stabilized, some shaky waters in Minnesota when Darisaw went down. I almost think that might be their guy. Or maybe they pay Ronnie Stanley, which that comes with some risk as well. But the drafting hasn't really worked out of that position. So I think they're going to go elsewhere, and maybe this becomes Tyreek Williams or Derek Harmon or something like that on the defensive line. Could also be a corner if the right guy's available, like a Trey Amos, a Nazaria Thomas if he's there. So I don't think it's going to be offensive tackle by the time we get to April, but I could be wrong. And then Walter Nolan goes criminally low here. Like, this is top 15 guy on my board. I've been having him go top 13 on most of my drafts. He goes 32, and this is just, what a Milton Williams replacement this would be. Just starting with that. Like, fantastic way to replace a really good player hitting the market. So I like it from that standpoint. Not a one-to-one comp, but, like, if you're going to lose him, like, getting my IDL2 somehow here at 32, it's just like, how did Howie Roseman do this once again? But yeah, I think he should go a lot higher than this. So that's kind of where I struggle with it. It'd be an unbelievably great pick here for the Eagles, but I just think he's off the board well before this. But, guys, that is the great reaction to Mel Kiper Jr. I'll give him a B. I think it's a solid mock. I'll go at 84 out of 100. Some things I don't totally agree with, but it's a good mock there for Mel. And now we get into the real fun stuff of this. I'm going to jump over to the PFF Mock Draft Simulator, and I'm going to give you a second round to tack on and continue where Mel Kiper Jr. left off. All right, we're now in the PFF Mock Draft Simulator. I'm going to give you a round 2, but before you do that, let's take a quick look at the best players available. It's unbelievable to look at some of the players that did not go in the first round of Mel Kiper Jr.'s first rounds. No Luther Burden, no James Pierce Jr., no Kenneth Grant, no Derek Harmon, which Harmon doesn't always go in the first round of my mocks, no Matthew Golden, That's interesting. And then you get Scorton, Alexander, guys who could sneak in there. As a Rock, who's another player to do that. Tyleek, TJ Sanders, kind of on the same boat here. So very interesting. And how about this? Braden Swinton up to 48, Shamar Turner up to 43. Some big-time risers lately for Mr. Trevor Sikkema of the Pro Football Focus. But wow, very interesting. Let's go ahead and let's continue on with this now 2-round mock draft with the Cleveland Browns. They went quarterback, and they obviously need to find potential Myles Garrett replacement. So let's keep this one easy. James Pierce Jr. should have gone in the first round, so that one's pretty simple. All right, then we get to the New York Giants. They go quarterback round, they go with Travis Hunter round 1. So you get to the second round. Do they want to be the team that sinks something into Dart / Tyler Shook? I don't necessarily love that, but you know what? Because I don't know what happened in free agency, I'll give him Tyler Shook. He's an older prospect, comes with injury issues, but he also kind of he almost kind of looks like Matt Stafford sometimes on certain plays. So if they like Matt Stafford and they link to him, it's kind of an interesting idea to kind of pair it there. All right, Tennessee Titans. They went Abdul Carter round 1. What do we want to give the Tennessee Titans here? Quarterback definitely makes some sense. Receiver also makes an abundance of sense. And I feel like I can't pass on this. So we're going to go with Luther Burden, get him a yards after the catch threat. Also a guy who I think can still stretch the field. Like, you go back to 2023, he's got enough speed to work downfield. So I think you're getting an easy button for that offense, which certainly could do something like that. So let's go with Luther Burden there for the Tennessee Titans. Back to the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was Mason Graham in the first round. Like that fit for them. Matthew Golden's kind of an intriguing guy here. Trey Amos. Yeah, we'll go Trey Amos. I think that's a secondary that definitely needs some reinforcements. I'm a big Trey Amos fan. I liked him a ton. He was actually the first guy we got to interview at the Senior Bowl. So big fan of his game, and I think he's made some huge strides, specifically in how he plays zone coverage. He's become a pretty well-rounded corner with a really nice build and solid athleticism. Then we get to the Vegas Raiders here at pick number 37. Yes, we already got the running back. This would be another spot where a quarterback would have been nice to go. I'm going to go Matthew Golden. I think this team could definitely use an outside receiver. One of the higher ranked players left on my board, him or Kenneth Grant, which could definitely go Kenneth Grant there. But I'm going to go with Matthew Golden, and this would have been a good spot to potentially go with Matthew Golden as well. So I kind of sniped myself here with the New England Patriots. That's the downside of doing this for the first time, kind of on your lonesome. And you could go like Jack Bash or another receiver here. I don't know if I really want to force it, though. I'm just going to go with Kenneth Grant. Go best player available. Nice, solid defensive interior. And also Christian Barmore, health scares there with the blood clot. So something that they might want to look at addressing here in the somewhat near future. All right, and he actually would have been a really good pick for the Chicago Bears. But Josh Simmons already off the board. Could we start looking running back here? Caleb Johnson is a really fun fit. Johnson or Darius Alexander is kind of where my head's at. Nick Scorton. I'm not ready to quit Nick Scorton either. I'll go with Nick Scorton. Love the Purdue tape more than I did this year, and I think he's just got to find that right weight. He's also going to be 20 on draft night, so I'm not really ready to quit him yet from that standpoint. All right, to the New Orleans Saints. Wow, this could be a good Derek Harmon landing spot. They already got Tyler Warren. Could you look at the receiver market here? Definitely. I like A.U. Manor. Could be fun to round out that offense. Or it could be a Darius Alexander spot. I like Alexander, but I think Harmon's the better prospect, so I'm going to go with Derek Harmon there. Try to partner him up with Brian Brzee and see what we can get out of those two long term. All right, back to the Chicago Bears. We could go Darius Alexander here. Like, we really could. But you know what? If he's there, I talked about him a moment ago. Let's go Caleb Johnson. Go get them, bell cow running back in the future. I think he's better than Swift. Him plus Johnson for the long term. I like that as a pairing there in the Windy City. All right, New York Jets. Oh, man. Darius Alexander is a really fun idea here. Kind of getting him right next to, him next to Quinnen Williams could be a lot of fun. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pass on that. Let me take a quick look at the corners available. Ooh, Siobhan Ravel. Oh, that's a guy that should go in the first round in my eyes. That's a tough one for me to pass on here. Ravel, this team could definitely use another corner. DJ Reed on. I'm going to go Darius Alexander, though. I'm going to go Darius Alexander, getting one more guy to partner up with Quinnen Williams there on the interior. Actually, he can move all across the defensive line, so he almost kind of serves as like John Franklin Myers for this team, who they let walk and ended up in Denver. All right, to the 49ers. Let's go offensive line here. I think this is a good spot for them to go O-line, but it's just going to come down to who is the right fit. Already gone corner, so don't need to worry about that. Offensive tackle. I don't hate Donovan Jackson here. 5-star, recruit coming out of high school. Some swing flexibility. Jonas Savanaye, I think, is a good fit, but you could probably get him in the next round. Cameron Williams is a fun fit, but probably get him the next round. It's a tough one. This is also a team that needs some edge and defensive line help. we think, other than Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave, it was kind of really those two feasting, and everything else was kind of famine for them last year. So I do think interior defensive line, edge, both those are in play. Braden Swinson could be fun here. You get Swinson in the mix. I'll go with Izaraku. Donovan Ezaraku, loved the arm length, and coming off a great year there at Boston College, and really like his game a lot. Then we get to the Dallas Cowboys, and Maureen Hampton's off the board. Could look at a right tackle here, try to find a Terrence Steele replacement. Could also look at the receiver market. A.U. Manor, that's a nice add to that offense. I like A.U. Manor as a compliment to CeeDee Lamb. Let's go with I like A.U. Manor there at pick number 44. Sends us to the Colts. Let's go to the tight end market. I think there's plenty of guys that fit what they're looking for. My last mock, I went Mason Taylor. Let's do it again here. Go get them that tight end that they didn't get in the first round. I think it's just that one more piece. Now it's like, sheesh, they got weapons everywhere. Really diversifying the portfolio there on that Colts offense. All right, Falcons here went Mike Green. Could we go look at the linebackers here? Could we look at corner? Siobhan Ravel, his ball skills and athleticism opposite AJ Terrell. That's too good for me to pass on. I think his man coverage still needs, a little bit of technique tweaking, and that's kind of where it sucks that he got hurt this year. But the athleticism and the ball skills and his size, that will play in that Raheem Morris defense. Then we get to the Cardinals. Could we go interior offensive line here? I think that's definitely a spot. Donovan Jackson makes a ton of sense. They just brought on, Fry from Ohio State. So, we'll go with Donovan Jackson there to be their Will Hernandez replacement. Maybe they bring him back as well. But Jackson will be the left guard of the future for the Cardinals in this mock. Look at the Dolphins. This is a great interior defensive line spot for them. So whether it's Tyreek Williams or TJ Sanders, I think they both could be in play. Josh Farmer, not a bad shout here either. I just don't think... Tyreek would be a really interesting fit for this team. You think about their identity being speed and then just like a massive space eater in the middle of that. So I'm going to go with TJ Sanders and think he's got a little bit more burst out of the first step, faster hands too. But I'm still a big fan of Tyreek. I just don't know if the Dolphins would see him as the guy they're trying to look like. He's not really a Christian Wilkins replacement. Sanders is a little bit closer to being something like that. All right, back to the Bengals. Went edge in the first round. I think they're going to keep T. Higgins around, so we don't need to do something like that. Already gone edge. Could you go interior defensive line? Could you just double up on that and go Tyreek Williams? Get a mean run defender for one of the worst run defenses in the league last year. I think that might have to be the move here. You could also look at the safety. You know what? Al Golden, the defensive coordinator from Notre Dame, taking over as the DC in Cincinnati. Let's go with Xavier Watts there in the second round. All right, then we get to the Seattle Seahawks at 50. Gone into your offensive line. I do think edge is a spot where they could get better, but I think they could use a weapon at linebacker. And that's exactly what Carson Schwetzinger is. Insane athleticism, especially for a guy who's a walk-on. If you don't watch Carson Schwetzinger yet, do yourself a favor. Very fun watch. Tampa Bay Bucks up next, so we already gone front seven. Could look at the corner room, but honestly, I think they need edge and linebackers, so I'm going to start... Well, here we go. This one's for Alex at Hail Mary Sports. Braden Swinson coming off the board here. I had 2 games I watched right before the Senior Bowl of Swinson, and I thought he was good. He was definitely someone who was like, I'll put him in my top 100. I want to watch more. The more I watch, and then, I start seeing these measurements for arm length coming in. I'm like, this guy might be a monster. So, Braden Swinson flying up my board as well with seemingly everyone else in the draft community. But Alex was the first one to it, so shout out to him. Denver Broncos, they've already gotten a tight end. It's another team that linebacker makes a lot of sense for, man. Safety also could be in play. PJ Locke, just not that great. But I don't know if I want to force it here in the second round. Demetrius Knight, some fun. Another team that could also go running back. I'm going to go Demetrius Knight. I think that's a good weapon. Good feel for zone coverage. Love him crashing downhill as a run defender. And I just like the athleticism as a whole in his profile. So really good second round option there. And I think could be a really nice add for Vance Joseph's defense. Pittsburgh Steelers, we've already gone receiver, so like I said earlier, I think they're going to go corner round 1, so I almost feel like you got to go corner here. You could get a couple of absolute monsters pairing up Darian Porter with Joey Porter Jr. Let's do it. Size wins, at the outside. At least, hopefully, that's the case here with the Steelers' philosophy, partnering up JPJ and Darian Porter, who not a whole lot of starting experience on the outside, but I love what tape is there, and I just love the instincts. This is a football player. Steelers kind of go back and forth. They, ran a lot of man coverage last year, but also there's some years where they tend to be a little bit more cover 3 heavy. And if they're going to draft Porter here, maybe that would be my preference because I do think that's ultimately where I think he could thrive at the next level, playing some zone coverage. All right, let's get on to the Los Angeles Chargers. They're next up here. Ted McMillan off the board from the first round of Mel's mocks, and naturally I'm kind of looking at running back, looking to see what we can get here. Travion Henderson could be fun as like a J.K. Dobbins replacement / guy just to eventually pass the torch to. Quinshaw Judkins, Devin Neal, Cam Scattaboo. Do we want to go Scattaboo? Let's go Scattaboo. Between the tackles guy, compliment there for J.K. Dobbins and Kamani Vidal long term. I like that. All right, Green Bay Packers. Is that Azaria Thomas already off the board? Yeah, I think I'm gonna look at the interior offensive line, see what centers we got available. Don't love the value of those guys there. You could go Marcus Bowe here. I don't feel like forcing that either. I do think Jack Besh in a lot of ways is a really good ad for this team. Could go Jaden Higgins as well. Besh or Higgins? That's a tough one. I'm gonna go Jaden Higgins. Big body guy, and I ultimately just think it really sure hands, and that's kind of like my point here. Just if you take away the inconsistency and ultimately like unreliability that is Christian Watson and replace that with the certainty and reliability that comes with Jaden Higgins' game, I think that's one that's kind of hard not to love. Also, they ask these guys to block and be active participants as a run blocker, and I think Higgins would be willing to buy into that. Also come from that neck of the woods. All right. Buffalo Bills here. They've already gone Jahdae Barron, which I would just adore that fit. And honestly here, Tyreek Williams has somehow fell to them in here at 56. That's as clean a pick as I'm going to get right there. No doubt about it. I've done that in the first round of my mocks. So Ed Oliver, not a great run defender. Tyreek Williams absolutely is. And then Ed Oliver's strength kind of matches up and hides the weakness that Tyreek Williams has. So love that pairing right there. Houston Texans. They got Kelvin Banks. So that's going to be some offensive line help. Jack Besh here. That makes a lot of sense too. Inside out flexibility. Let's go Jack Besh there. Just sudden enough as a route runner, but great hands. Really like Jack Besh. He's coming off an awesome Senior Bowl. And if it was Bobby Sloak still there, I think there's a lot of like the things of the Shanahan offense that he would be able to do really, really well, but that is not the case, obviously. All right, Carolina Panthers. They've already gone with defensive line. Could we look at the corner room here? I think we do. You know what? And if he makes it to 58, even with the potential hip injury, he's worth a flyer there at that spot. So Morrison's tough. I think he should go in the first round, but it's going to come down to what the medicals say. He's had 2 hip surgeries, one in high school and then obviously one that ended his year this year. And with how he plays, that's a huge part of the formula for him. All right, Baltimore Ravens. They went Nick Emanwari, and it's almost kind of like you drafted a Kyle Hamilton replacement because Hamilton had to play free safety last year because Marcus Williams didn't work out. So that's kind of interesting. Edge, offensive line also makes sense. We'll see what happens with free agency and Ronnie Stanley. I don't really love the options available to him here, to be completely honest. Even on the interior, I'm not fully in love with what they could potentially do there. So let's say they bring back Ronnie Stanley. Maybe they'll look at the receivers. Oof. Could Trey Harris be the guy here? Trey Harris has got his fans out there, man. You love the size. I think he's going to test really well. More wiggle in his routes than you just generally think. The route tree is not super advanced, but when they give him the chance to do something other than a screen, a hitch, or a go, he showcases there's something there. Jalen Royals is also interesting, but he might be a slot only. Savion Williams. You know what? Let's go Trey Harris. This is about as early as I've had him in a mock, just because I am still kind of waiting to see what the medicals say, what the testing ultimately is. But there is stuff to like about Trey Harris's game. So in that big body X receiver, freeing up Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers to do the Y and the Z stuff, makes sense on paper. All right, back to the Detroit Lions. We've gone edge. Could we go into your offensive line here? I know I just said I don't really love the value of these guys. Wyatt Milam's not a bad ad, or Savin Ayaya. I'll go Milam here. And ultimately, I guess I could have done that the pick before this, but I was really kind of looking for a potential tackle there. But Wyatt Milam, we'll have him be the left guard of the future. The Lions are getting a little old on the inside, and I think plugging in Milam, one of those guard spots, makes a ton of sense. He got better as the week went on at the Senior Bowl, but it was a bit of a transition as he worked his way inside. But I do think that's ultimately where he fits, and experience running zone and gap scheme stuff. So that kind of matches with what the Lions want to do. A little bit of both. Commanders, here we go. They've gone Maxwell Hairston. Could look at the offensive tackles. Honestly, you could still go edge here, too. I don't hate that whatsoever. Uman Mielen could just give them a really nice edge winner. Jack Sawyer kind of feels like a lunch pail guy that Dan Quinn would love, though. So Uman Mielen or Sawyer. I'll go with Sawyer here. Again, lunch pail, just does the small things right. Started batting down passes in college football playoffs. So he's adding a little bit to his game. Not going to wow, he was an athlete, but he also is a really good run defender. So you're getting some 3-down work out of Jack Sawyer there if you're the Commanders. Then we get back to the Bills. So another chance, another swing of the bat here. You could look at receiver, depending on who the guy you want is. I don't think the value lines up with any of the guys that I would draft here. Just extended Shakir this morning. Actually, as of me recording this, that was just a handful of hours ago. I'll go back to the well here. You know what? I'll do something a little different. I normally do Chris Paul Jr. here, but I'll go Jeffrey Bassa. Really nice athlete, good feel in zone coverage. Could totally fit with what Sean McDermott wants out of the middle of his defense. Chiefs, they went Ariante Ursary. This could be an interesting Shamar Turner spot, right? Really athletic guy, made the move from edge to interior, battled a lot of injuries this year. Alfred Collins is a really nice run defender to partner up with Chris Jones. Omar Norman Lott, great pass rusher to pair with him. Josh Farmer, who's just like this uber, almost bull in a china shop type of strength and burst off the line of scrimmage. You know what? I'm going to go Josh Farmer here just to do something a little different. And he really popped for me at the Senior Bowl, especially on day 3. He really stood out. But even day 1, he had some reps where I was like, dude, Josh Farmer is out here balling. So big fan of his game. The PFF grades aren't going to wow you, but watch the tape. Really good player who basically got the lion's share of attention from opposing offenses this past year at Florida State. Then to the Philadelphia Eagles. The last pick we'll make in this continuation of Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest mock draft, the Philadelphia Eagles. This is one, if he's there, that for me it's pretty simple, and they've already gone defensive line. So I'm going to go Cameron Williams. This is your Lane Johnson replacement. He's raw. Let him sit behind Lane Johnson for a year and then, pass the torch to him. He's got all the tools and traits to be a first rounder. He's just going to take a little bit of time. But guys, that is going to do it for not only my reaction to Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest mock draft, but a second round to go with it. Let me know what you think about this, grade the mock, and then the second round continuation. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, or you can hit me up on Twitter, reply to this post on Twitter. I'll be sure to keep an eye out for what people are saying. And again, if you want to see it, all you got to do is say it. If I get enough response and enough people wanting to see this same type of video tomorrow for Todd McShay's first 2025 mock draft, I will make it happen for you guys tomorrow. So let me hear those thoughts. Of course, let me hear what you think about this mock draft. Who went too high? Who went too low? Who's your favorite team? What'd you think of the haul that Mel and I gave your squad? Let me hear those thoughts in the comments as well, and the replies to this post on X. But I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. This is going to do it for me. My name's TJ. For 32 Beat Writers, we are signing off.